Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. I've got a really interesting gentleman that you've probably heard before because he's been very evident on radio, TV, etc. in the Toronto area in the past. But he's got a new endeavor called 1 Minute Morning, which we want to delve into and understand what he's trying to achieve with this motivational 1 minute every day. And so I'd like you all to introduce you to Tom Hayes. Tom, welcome to the show, sir.
Hello, Brian. Thank you very much for having me, and congratulations on your show.
Thank you. Very, very kind. You've got an incredibly illustrious career. Tell me, why did you launch this 1 Minute Morning and what's it all about?
Well, there's a few things why I launched 1 Minute Morning, but number one was simply to inform people the best way I know how in these times when attention spans, have been shrinking. So 1 Minute Morning basically get you up to speed within a minute in the morning when things are crazy. You're getting ready, you might be getting the kids ready, you're working on lunches. You really may not have that time. So the idea behind 1 Minute Morning was just to get people up to speed. And our scenario is, someone gets to work, gets to the elevator, and someone says, "Hey, did you hear about the $1 billion shortfall in the city of Toronto?" And we covered City Hall quite a bit too on 1 Minute Morning. So now you can say, "Yeah, I heard about that. Let's talk about that. Let's have a discussion." So it's basically a packed 1 minute with 4 or 5 stories in order to get you up to speed at the beginning of the day. 1 Minute Morning. A good alliteration, I'd have to say too.
I think it's fantastic. I'm going to have to subscribe. So you've been on the evening news in Toronto for over 30 years, and you've been a news anchorman with CTV, with City TV, with Global News. You're a real, connoisseur of local news. How does that switch from, those kinds of newscasts to 1 minute?
Yeah, it's adapting, Brian. It's doing news and information. By the way, I love local news. I've had the opportunity throughout my career to join national, international news or whatever, but my love is in local news, and I teach it as well too. I'm a professor at Seneca as well too. So my love is local news. The issue is 2023 and getting that message out and getting that news out. It's an archaic system that I came from over 30 years with CTV and City TV and Global News as well too. That system where the TV station dictates, you sit down on your couch at 6 p.m. and we'll tell you what's going on. So that's the control of the television station, the control of the newsroom. And as we know today, that control has completely flipped with social media. The person in control is now the consumer. They want to absorb news when they want to, not when they're sort of dictated to. So with 1 Minute Morning, we put it out very early in the morning. We start with an editorial call around 5:30 a.m. and we're up by 7:45, 8 o'clock. So if you're crazy busy just getting ready in the morning, getting the family going, trying to get to work on the subway, a simple click on your time, not my time, on your time, a simple click, get you up to speed and you can see what's going on. So it's the evolution of local news or news in general, I would say, that is really sort of behind what we're doing at 1 Minute Morning.
It's fascinating, and a little bit scary because I'm 47 minutes, so I'm the complete opposite of what you're doing. I'm a long form interview, but I agree with you. I think that people do want to get that quick hit of what's going on, and regrettably too often they may get it from Facebook or TikTok or something, and may or may not be objective. It may or may not be accurate, and so therefore having someone like you provide that service is great. If people want to check you out and to subscribe to your service, how do they do that, sir?
So they can find 1 Minute Morning on all platforms. It's also something I think that's unique with 1 Minute Morning is that it works on all platforms. When we launched, I wasn't even considering TikTok. I think that's not going to work on TikTok. And TikTok is our biggest audience. So the crazy creative kids on TikTok are kind of digging what we're doing because they're getting informed on their time and at their speed. So we're on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, and all you have to do is search 1 Minute Morning. So it's the number 1 Minute Morning or at 1 Minute Morning. You'll find us on Instagram and TikTok primarily. Facebook is a big one as well too. Let me just say about long form too and what you're doing. There really is two worlds when it comes to information. And I find that people want to get updated right away, what's going on, or they want to sit back and make an appointment and take some time to sort of go deeper into issues or whatnot. So that's why I think you're successful with this program too, is because it offers something different that people can tune into again on their own time. They can find it, right, and tune in and go a little bit deeper into issues as well too. So I think it's a great combination and a world that sort of allows for both of those short form and long form. But dictating somebody to sit down at a particular time because we're going to tell you what's going on, that's very old school.
Well, what I tend to do with some of the newscasts that I really quite enjoy is I PVR them and watch them when it's convenient for me. So,
right,
and
you fast forward through the commercials, which is the bread and butter of the news programming. It's what built my house and raised a family. Commercials. But when you PVR and kind of skip through things, the advertisers don't get the bang for the buck too. So we offer advertisers very limited 4-second commercials on 1 Minute Morning. So it's really a branding exercise. And it's a great sort of hit in order to, nobody's fast forwarding through 4 seconds, right? So it's sort of a branding hit that's very effective.
Well, and I have to be candid that I fast forward through some of the interviews that I don't find overly compelling and interesting either. So I am, even with those appointment programs, doing it at my own time and consuming what I want to consume, not necessarily what the people that are the executive producers or whatever are deciding that I should produce. Right. So 1 Minute Morning sounds like it's an excellent way to consume local news. Is it also international news or is it just local?
It's just local. As I said, my love is local news. And international news, there is so much content online from all over the world. We all know what's happening in the world these days, and it's tragic. So there's coverage of international news all over social media. Why do I love local news? Because it's my backyard, it's my neighborhood, it's my street. It's like municipal politics, really the most important politics you can vote on, and yet 30% of people turn out to vote because it is your neighborhood, your street, and your backyard, your parks, your municipal taxes. So local news is very much the same. It's what's happening in your backyard. And it needs to be consumed, and you need to know what's going on in your own backyard in order to protect it, or your street or your neighborhood. So it's also a minute long, so there's only so much news we can squeeze in. But definitely our focus is local.
Well, it seems like it's also under attack with closures of local newspapers and local TV stations and other vehicles. Local news is one of those things that's very difficult to get in today's marketplace. So thank you very much for supplying that. We're going to have to take a break for some messages. We're going to be back in just 2 minutes with Tom Hayes, who's got a 30-year career in television and radio, broadcasting local news primarily, and has now launched something called 1 Minute Morning, which is a quick summary of local news that you need to know. Stay with us, everyone. We'll be back in just 2 minutes with Tom Hayes. Welcome back, everyone, to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. It's a real pleasure for me tonight to meet Tom Hayes and introduce him to all of you. Probably most of you have met him already. He's had a 30-year career on City TV, on CTV News, on Global News, but now he's trying to reinvent the news and the way we consume local news he's launched something called 1 Minute Morning, which is available on Instagram and Facebook and TikTok and other places, so you can get a quick hit on what's going on in our local city. Tom, you've had really quite a long, illustrious career, and you're now actually a professor you teach journalism at Seneca College. News has changed a lot. Let's take a step back, if we could, for a couple of minutes and talk about that. You probably saw this show, I think it was called Network, where the anchor bemoans the fact that we've changed from an era where we listened to, and it was a U.S. show, and so it was about 3 people that were the anchormen who presented the evening news every night, and they were objective, and they provided everyone with the same news. In Canada, it was Peter Mansbridge or Lloyd Robertson or something like that. And everyone got sort of the same news, and everyone knew what was going on if they watched those news. And as you say, it was on appointment. You had to watch the news when they wanted to show it. To an era today where the different stations in the United States primarily are entertainment, and there's more commentator and a lot of interviews about different opinion people about what's going on with the news rather than actually reporting of the news. And then a lot of people getting the news on social media, which may or may not be accurate, which may or may not be slanted, which may be coming from, we hear about this all the time, bots from Hamas or bots from Russia, and who knows whether that's even true, that's where the news is coming from. So are we better today that we can consume it when we want? Or are we worse today because this guy in network was right, that we don't have the trusted people that gave us the objective news?
That's a great question. Are we better today? We're certainly more convenient today. Technology is certainly better today, but are we being informed as well as we were before? Well, there's more information out there. So you would say, sure, we're being informed more because there's more and more content. But you use the word opinion, which is a great word to talk about, excuse me, when it comes to journalism. So journalism is you cover a story and you say, here's the story. Here's what this side says. Here's what this side says. And here's the story. Now you go off and you decide your opinion on that story. And I think what you're referencing to, particularly in the States with opinion journalism, is it journalism if everything is so slanted and it's so left or right as well too? It's journalism, and I tell my students this as well too, you need to present both sides. You need to present the facts of the story the best that you can, and as much of the story the best that you can, so that you then let the viewer or the listener, the consumer of news, then go and make their own opinion about news. That is what journalism is, period. But things have certainly changed since then. So back in the day when we would watch limited newscasts, and they were presented in a way that I think was more sort of both sides, you sort of paid attention and then you sort of formed your own opinion from that. But now we are inundated, especially online. Some of it's called citizen journalism. And the concern for me is, who is it that's giving me that information? Is this someone I can trust as a journalist, or does this person have an agenda with this information? And you reference bots and whatnot. We know that the U.S. Presidential election was interfered with because of technology. And it made and stories would come out and they would influence people online. So I always tell people that when you're consuming something online, make sure you understand who is giving you that information, and ask yourself, do you trust that person? Do you trust that organization? Do you trust that source? Are they giving me both sides? Because if they're not, then it's not true journalism, and the journalist is not doing a proper job.
So are we better off or worse off today?
That was the first question, wasn't it? So I'm going to say, for me personally, I'm better off because I launched something. No, because I got to launch something called 1 Minute Morning.
Oh, okay.
And I couldn't have done that 10 years ago, and you couldn't do this show 10 years ago, simply because of technology. So the technology allows us to participate and put out content. And I put out journalistic content. 1 Minute Morning gets you up to speed in the morning. So I would say things are better so far as technology, but are people being informed properly? Do they understand the information that they're getting and the source that they're getting it from? That I'm not so sure about. So did I answer your question? I'm not sure I did. Technology is better.
Saying the technology is better. It allows you and I to get our news out. I used to have to go to a studio to do my show every night, and it was incredibly inconvenient. And I had to be there. We wanted to do live and we wanted to do call in. And we found that few people were calling in. Lots of people were listening, but to get people to actually call in, and the people that called in were sometimes not necessarily the people that we wanted to have call in. And then during the pandemic, we converted from in studio to being able to record at my convenience and from wherever I was. And I traveled a fair amount in my regular day job. And so unquestionably, that was far more convenient from our standpoint. We've lost that ability to do the call-in with the technology. I got to figure out how to engineer that. I need a switcher board or something like that in my on my computer. But there was this. I can't remember the name of it, The Long Wave or something like that book that was the rage a couple years ago that suggested with technology, we were going to have access to a lot more music, access to a lot more books, access to a lot more media, and we were all going to be playing in that long wave and be able to make money in that long wave and distribute and access a lot more information in that long wave. But the opposite has actually come true, where we are, even though we have more access to more music, more news, more TV shows, etc., we tend to only focus on the top, and the stars or the most popular have become even more dominant in this world. And some people explain it as there's just so much noise out there that people want to know who Taylor Swift is, and everyone focuses on the one main act rather than playing in that long wave. So, it's interesting. I think that you're right. The technology.
I think that's a great analogy, because more information was supposed to make us better informed, correct?
Yeah.
Are we better informed with more technology? And you can argue that we're not, as you said, simply because there's so much information out there, it's hard to digest.
And we're creating, supposedly data every year comparable to what all the data was that was ever created before like 1950. So it's interesting. But you focus on local, and that's interesting as well, because I think that local has been under attack, and every week or month it seems like we're hearing reading an article or hearing a story about some newspaper chain that's closing down all the local newspapers, or radio or television company that's closing down a whole bunch of local stations, or cable company that's closing down the local cable access. Are people interested in local news anymore? And you even said that only 30% of the people turn out for local elections. Actually, I think the last by-election was like 28% or something.
Yeah,
like that.
it was lower than that.
So, and that was a really topical one, given that it was voting for a brand new mayor for the first time in a while. So, are people interested in local?
So I would say yes, people are interested in local, and I hope they are. Excuse me, because we find that online, and I'll go back to my TikTok reference. TikTok is an amazing platform with incredibly talented and creative people, young people putting out incredibly creative material. So TikTok provides us with our biggest numbers. We're getting about 80,000 views a month. We just launched 5 months ago. And most of that comes from TikTok. So that tells me that young people are interested in local news. And why wouldn't they be? Simply because it is your neighborhood. It is your news. And you should want to be kept up to speed about what's going on. It's just the attention span. We've all used the Andy Warhol reference of 15 minutes of fame. Well, I think in 2023, it's down to 15 seconds. And maybe even 1.5 seconds. Algorithms will tell you on social media, you've got, I believe, 3 seconds to catch someone's attention, and before they just keep doing this and passing by. So it's a challenge to be seen, but we're being seen, especially on TikTok at 1 Minute Morning. So that tells me that yes, people are still interested in local news.
Local news has been closed down by a lot of companies, though, and so therefore, where do you get your news? Like there aren't going to be the local news reporters. There aren't going to be the local newspapers and radio stations. How do you get the local news?
How's the 6 o'clock news doing? I mean, we all know that Bell Media went before the CRTC. The news on television is mandated. CRTC says you have to have so many hours of local news on CTV. But Bell Media recently went to the CRTC to try and get that number decreased. So that takes local news and an attempt to decrease the amount of that you're getting. So local news is under attack from all sorts of areas. You talk about newspapers as well too, but especially on television as well too. Having said that, the 6 o'clock news isn't exactly an institution because of technology. The 6 o'clock news has only been around for what, 50, 60 years, and it only evolved because of technology, because of television. And it started as people basically reading the newspaper or the wire copy on air, and it was mandated to be there. So it was started by technology, and maybe it's just technology that is slowly eroding it as well. Newspapers have been around forever. It's a tough game when you're trying to sell a newspaper, because when you pick up a newspaper today, what you're reading is instantly dated. Whereas you see it online, it's sort of as it's happening as well too. So the option becomes looking at news that may be dated, or getting online and finding something that's happening now and working now and is at the moment and can offer me something that's going on in my city. That's what we try to do. 1 minute morning, we're giving to you first thing in the morning. It's brand new content. It's here's what's going on, and now you're up to speed.
You mentioned that you're on TikTok. There's been a lot of controversy about TikTok. In the last Republican debate, it was almost suggested that they were going to ban TikTok, and suggested that if parents didn't ban their kids watching and being on TikTok, they were bad parents. So what's the future of TikTok?
The future of TikTok is 1 minute morning. We're there to save it, to give it some legitimacy. TikTok is huge. If you dive in, it's evolving content. There is some fantastic content. I sort of liken it to YouTube, but with a lot quicker content. So you can find out how to do anything, music publishing, and anything that's going on creative. There's all sorts of handy people on there showing you how to fix things. So it's similar to YouTube that way. YouTube's brilliant, right? How do I do this? And someone on YouTube is doing it. And I think that's what TikTok is evolving into. The concern about TikTok has certainly come and maybe waned a little bit since that. So I'm not sure where there was concern about foreign ownership. Is it too invasive? All we know is that our biggest consumption is on TikTok. So, and we know that we're giving legit content. So I'm quite happy with that.
We're chatting tonight about news, primarily local news. Our guest has been in the news business for over 30 years. Tom Hayes has recently launched something called 1 Minute Morning, which is a way that we can access information about what's going on in our city and the whole GTA in just 1 minute on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, etc. We've talked about, and we're going to talk a little bit more, I think, about this news and how this news world and how it's changed. And I think it's a really interesting topic, because are we all listening to the same news that we want to listen to and therefore living in an echo chamber, or are we actually getting the kind of news that's objective and the kind of news that really, to be a good citizen, we need to get? Fascinating conversation. Stay with us, everyone. We'll be back in just 2 minutes. Welcome back, everyone, to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. I've had this show for a couple of years. I've done just over 1,000 shows, but my guest tonight has been in the business reporting for over 30 years. And he's been, Tom Hayes has been on City TV, on CTV, on Global News. And he's now a professor at Seneca College, telling students about journalism and journalism careers and how to become a reporter, etc. And he's now launched something called 1 Minute Morning, which is a way that we can get access to what's going on in our local community real quick. Tom, I wonder, could you tell us, just to give us a sense of, what 1 Minute Morning is all about, what some of the stories are that you've covered in like the last couple of days or the last week?
Well, the city of Toronto certainly has a lot of stories every day. So we like to keep an eye on City Hall. the city is facing a $1 trillion deficit. So where does that's a lot of money. Where does that money come from? Ultimately, it comes from the taxpayers' pocket as well, too. I know Mayor Chow has gone to the province, to the feds for some help too. But $1 trillion is a lot of money to be down when you're trying to keep a city the size of Toronto up and running. And then beyond that, and because of that, you can look at housing as well too. Can a middle-class family afford to live in Toronto, in the GTA anymore? And if they can't, then what does that do to the livability of the city of Toronto? And what I've always loved about Toronto is that it is a livable city, very much like New York City, much smaller, but very much like New York City. You know, if you travel around North America, there are cities that basically empty out at 6 p.m. because nobody lives in them. They live in the suburbs. Toronto has always been a livable city. And is it able to sustain that character moving forward if the average family or couple or elderly couple can't afford to stay there anymore? So housing is huge. Taxes and deficit, absolutely. But just the flavor of Toronto as well, too, we like to touch on as well. Is it able to sustain? Is it changing? Are we losing that livable city that Toronto has been known to? You know, Toronto the good, right? We all know that. Are we losing that? Are we able to keep that going forward? So we keep a close eye on City Hall and transit as well, too, I'll say as well.
Well, transit, you know, I used to be chair of a civic advocacy organization called Transit Alliance. I was downtown on Thursday and Friday night. The congestion was just unbelievable. There's construction seemingly going on almost everywhere. But even when there wasn't construction, the Don Valley, the QEW, Bayview, you know, every street I seemed to go on was stop and go, you know, for hours. And I think lots of people have been commenting on this of late. What's gone wrong with our transit?
If you ask me personally, it simply hasn't kept up. Toronto likes to pretend it's a world-class city, but when you look around London, New York City, London, you know, we talk about we're now boring the Scarborough extension. London always has a boring machine in the ground. They're always expanding because they need to keep it up to date. We've all seen the maps of New York, London, and then Toronto subway system. So I love to look back sort of the turn of the century, you know, around the early 1900s. And there was great vision then to put this thing underground. Let's start a subway system in Toronto. People were thinking not about the next municipal election or getting reelected. They were thinking 50 years, 100 years ahead. And I'm not so sure we have that anymore. I think we're very focused on today, tomorrow, maybe getting reelected in the next municipal election, instead of working on things that are going to benefit this city 100 years from now. And why we don't have subway lines popping up all over, well, I do know why. It's because of the cost of them. But we need to build more subways, and they're very expensive, but just build them because we need them.
But it seems like we just don't know how to build them. You know, this Eglinton Crosstown LRT, you know, was supposed to be open already. And now they don't even, you know when it's going to open. They don't even want to announce the date because there's so many things wrong with it. And, you know, I would have thought an LRT would have been cheaper and faster to build. Yeah, they've dug it underground, but it just seems like we just don't know how to build.
I look back at the Scarborough LRT. I covered the Scarborough LRT when it opened back in the 80s, and it's come and gone. You know, I'll go back to Mayor Ford. You know, subways are subways. They do last forever, but they're so expensive to build. But we need them, and we need that other infrastructure around it, streetcars and GO train service as well too. But subways is how people like to get around, and you dig that hole and you've got that hole forever, unlike an LRT that has a lifespan. And the current, I know what you're saying about the opening date of the Eglinton run. They don't have one.
They don't
In
have
fact,
one.
the last news conference was to say we're going to keep you updated as to when we're going to announce an opening. And we all know it's gone way over budget. So there's some efficiency issues, I suppose, when it comes to building. What did we just pay to get that boring machine out of the ground that was stuck? The cost is unbelievable, but maybe the management of the project as well too needs to be
I think the management
upgraded.
of the program is a big issue. That said, we have to give credit where credit's due. I can remember complaining about the the construction of Union Station. Have you been through Union Station recently? It's stunning.
Absolutely, it's stunning. It's gorgeous, and I love that it's the same building. I love what they've done to it. Again, let's go back to when Union Station was built. There was a vision there. This is going to be the hub of Toronto. So I love what they've done to it as well. Even the outside helicopter shots, from Hockey Night in Canada, where you see it glowing off the top, it looks like it's a gorgeous building.
But the food hall, the shops, the access to the trains, the 2-3 stories that they built underground. I'm amazed that, and maybe it was helpful that they did some of the final construction during the pandemic when people weren't using the service as much as they did. But it seems like a couple of years ago we were complaining about this nonstop construction. Now that it's done, it really is unbelievable. You're in Pickering, I'm in Mississauga, but yet you cover local news and you talk about Olivia Chow, the mayor. Do we have the right system in the GTA? You think about New York, they took 5 different cities, 5 different boroughs, combined it into one. The GTA, I interviewed a guy by the name of Joe Barrage, who's the head of urban strategies, one of the top, urban affairs, urban planning companies. And he said that Toronto is going to be the 3rd largest metropolitan region in all of North America within a couple of years, rivaling Los Angeles and New York, bigger than Chicago, Dallas, etc. But he says we don't manage it. We don't govern it like that. And we don't have a vision for this area that goes really from Oshawa to Kitchener, Waterloo, and Niagara. And it's going to be, 6, 7, 8 million people. Do we have a vision for the greater Toronto area, not just Toronto?
Well, we certainly have the population, as you mentioned. Toronto is currently the 4th largest city in North America, but you have to include Mexico City in there as well, too. So it's Mexico City, Toronto, Mexico City, New York, LA, Toronto, because we just did pass Chicago in size. So do we combine the entire GTA into one government? Are we going back to the Mike Harris days when he took remember Metro Council and Mr. Godfrey, the chair of Metro Council? It was just another whole level of government that he got rid of and turned Scarborough, North York, Etobicoke, and York into one government. The reason has to be efficiency. That's the only reason why you would do it. So I know there's been talk in Durham. Do we need 7 municipalities for 2 million people? Can we combine that? Can the whole GTA be combined into one region? I think that's a big hill to climb, simply because you need to get past the local feel of residents. Would there be support on the ground for such a move? I'm not so sure there is, because people tend to like their own distinct areas.
But yet, as you say, only 30% of them vote. And frankly, I think in a lot of municipalities, it's less than 30%. So do they really care? When you travel to the United States or Europe, do you say you're from Pickering or do you say you're from Toronto?
No, I was born on the Danforth, raised in Scarborough. So, and I always say I live in Pickering with the rest of Scarborough. So, no, of course I say I'm from Toronto. It depends. I was in Dubai, so I say I'm from Canada, right? Or I recently got back from Zambia.
My friend Bill from Calgary.
Right. So it's a big place. So it depends where you're traveling to. You've traveled to the States. I say I'm from Toronto. If I travel overseas, then I'm from Canada. So you mentioned those other cities. How does New York operate? They combined all of the boroughs into one city. How does that operate? Would that be a model for us here? They certainly have more people than they do. It might be something to look at.
Well, I'm certainly a believer that the cities that work together, that collaborate, that cooperate, that have combined entities end up being far more successful. In Denver, there was a major study about transit and other things, and it was all turned down in a plebiscite about a decade and a half ago when all the cities were competing with each other. They got together and started to plan and think about them as a metropolitan region, and they passed all the plebiscites and the referendum for combined transit. LA County is a similar kind of process where once you take a look at LA today and all the controversy about how the traffic on the 405 and the 10, et cetera, are terrible, and they still are, but they actually have a built out an LRT system that rivals almost any LRT system, subway system, bus system in the world. It's really quite impressive. In the late 1990s, Ann Golden did a major study called the GTA Task Force. I think it was Harris that convened it or commissioned it. And she recommended Durham combine into one city, York into one city, Halton into one city, and Peel into one city. So you've got 24 cities, 29 different entities, including the regional governments, into 4. And then with Toronto, those 5 cities to create a new GTA council comparable to what you described. I thought that was an interesting vision. And as you know, and you probably reported on it, Harris took the report and only implemented 1/5 of it, which was the amalgamation of Toronto, and left off the balance.
I do think his intention, though, was to continue with that report, but he didn't continue as premier. There were rumblings or hints that after Toronto was amalgamated, that vision might go beyond 416.
You talked about debt and deficit as a big issue, like it really is.
Yeah.
What's the solution there? Any idea?
There's only one taxpayer, right? So the only solution is money. And the city of Toronto is not in the business of making money. They're in the business of running a city on taxpayers' dollars. So that's kind of an easy one to answer. Money only comes from the taxpayer, whether it's going cap in hand to Ottawa or the province, or municipally raising rates and property taxes and whatnot. It's still coming out of my pocket and your pocket and everybody else's pocket. So there's only one taxpayer, and the solution is money. How you get that?
So we're going to have to pay more taxes, is what you're saying.
Well, I don't think taxes have ever gone down. Right. I believe the income tax was a temporary measure during the war, and it certainly hasn't ever disappeared, and definitely not gone down. So we have to pay. If the city of Toronto could run a business where it made money to supplement the city, that would be brilliant. But otherwise, it's the taxpayer.
It's really interesting that there are so many critical issues that Toronto and the Greater Toronto Area is facing, whether it be taxes, deficit, whether it be transit. Affordability has got to be the number one issue that people are talking about around the dinner table, and what's going to happen with real estate prices. I'm not sure about you, but I have kids that are looking to buy their own homes, and they just can't afford to buy anything other than maybe a 700 square foot, if they're lucky, condo. And if they want to have a single family home and afford it and have a reasonable mortgage, they've got to be, an hour and a half out of the city before they could possibly dream of affording it. So I do think that this affordability issue is a massive one that needs to be addressed. And really only city governments and provincial and federal governments have started talking about it in the last little while, as interest rates have gone up, and so people really are completely focused on it for the first time in a long time. So
what's the solution? What's the solution to affordable housing? One thing might be going back to what my parents did when they immigrated to this country. They bought a house with another couple, and they shared that house, and that would require zoning. So that's where the city of Toronto could get involved and change zoning and change bylaws and whatnot, but maybe you're sharing a house, an upper and a lower, like my parents did many years ago.
Well, I think this, as of
mid-50s.
right, zoning ability to turn your house from a single family home into a duplex or a triplex or a quadplex, that makes sense. I don't think that's going to solve the crisis. That's going to certainly help, but I don't think that's going to solve it. Last week, it's interesting in BC, the provincial government in major transit areas mandated a minimum height of 20 stories. Right now, Mississauga, York, a lot of places around the GTA have maximum heights, even in transit areas of 10, 12 stories, if even that. And once in a while we'll get a higher building. But to have a provincial government override local municipalities and say, if you're within 800 meters of a major transit zone, you cannot build unless you're building at least 20 stories. That's a pretty massive change, and will change people's attitude, and I think make a lot of sense. Anyway, that's one solution. But we got to take a final break for some messages, and then we're going to be back with Tom Hayes talking about local news in just 2 minutes with some concluding comments. Stay with us, everybody. Welcome back, everyone, to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. My guest tonight is Tom Hayes, who produces and distributes something every morning that you should plug into called 1 Minute Morning, which is a quick summary of what's going on in the Greater Toronto Area every morning, and published and distributed via social media, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, etc. Tom, you said you took a trip recently and it gave you an interesting attitude. Tell us about that.
Well, we've spent the last hour together here, Brian, sort of, maybe complaining about a lot of things, but I just recently followed a group of surgeons. I'm documenting them to Zambia, Chitokoloki, Zambia, and they do incredible work, volunteer surgery on kids that would never see a surgeon otherwise. Mothers would walk for 2 or 3 days with a child on their back in order to make it to this window of 3 days when the surgeon was there. So every travel is fantastic because it makes you appreciate what you have at home. And I know we've spent a lot of time sort of going over complaints and what's wrong with this city and what needs to be improved or how do we improve it. But boy, when you travel in some parts of the world and you come home and you kind of feel like never complaining about anything ever again, even though we still do.
We still do, but you're right. We're pretty lucky. We live in a pretty wonderful city and a pretty wonderful country. There's no question about that. Tom, remind everyone what the name of your show is and how one can get it.
Okay, it is 1 Minute Morning, the number 1 Minute Morning. You can find it at 1 Minute Morning on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn. 1 Minute Morning. It's Monday to Friday every morning. Check in after 8 o'clock in the morning, and you will get up to speed with the news, the stories that matter for that day going ahead. And thank you for everybody that's been joining us so far in 1 Minute Morning. It's been a great success so far. And Brian, thank you so much for allowing me to come on your fabulous show, and congratulations with its success.
Thank you, Tom. And I look forward to signing up for your show and getting better informed on what's going on in the Greater Toronto Area. There's no question. And when we've got some interesting issues of local politics coming on, we'll have to connect up again, sir.
Absolutely. Look forward to it.
That's our show for tonight. Thanks, everyone, for joining. I remind you that I'm on every Monday through Friday at 6 p.m. on 960 AM. But because of Tom's comment about appointment news, you can also get me after the fact on Instagram, on Facebook, on LinkedIn, on YouTube, and or on my website, briancrombie.com, where I post all of my podcasts, my audio versions, as well as the video versions. And check me out whenever you've got some time to listen to a long form. So if you want short, go to Tom. If you want long, come to Brian, and or get both of us. Thanks, everyone.
Sounds good.